just want to share with you hopefully some very useful insights on what it means to be involved in Catholic education, what's really going on there. I encourage you to take as many notes as you can, because Thomas Aquinas beautifully said that the hand is the conjoined instrument of the mind. What is really happening in this work of Catholic education? What is God up to with having you in it? Why aren't you an accountant? Why aren't you mowing lawns? Why aren't you a nurse? Or why aren't you doing something different to this? Now, I know not all of you are necessarily in frontline teaching, but if you're in this room, you have obviously some interest in the education space. So what I've been pitching to people is this very simple idea. If you would like to completely transform Catholic education, if you would like to completely accomplish the purposes of God for you in the space that He's placed you, what I'm going to tell you to do is incredibly simple. It's not easy, but it's very simple. All I need you to do is this. Just become a saint. That's all you have to do. Now, very carefully, do you notice, you guys are really good, but did you hear that noise in the room? We hear this little noise all over the world. You hear the same noise. People laugh, they cough, they go, oh, why do we do that? Because we've all at some level come to understand that there is a saint factory in heaven, and it has a conveyor belt, and saints roll off this conveyor belt and they land in cribs with hands like this. They say thou a lot, and they end up in stained glass windows. And for many of us, that's not enormously appealing. There's a deep truth in the fact that the church is trying to tell us that our vocations are designed to make us saints. Now, you probably heard that, but there is a big shift the moment you go from concept to no, the church is actually serious. That you're actually, so as you know, there's two ways this is going to happen. Primary vocation, married, religious life, consecrated single. As I like to say, marriage does one of two things, kills you or makes you a saint. God is trying to make you a saint through what? The real, concrete circumstances of your life. Not the abstract, necessarily metaphysical ones. He'll do that too. Like He'll do that through contemplative prayer and adoration and the sacraments. But how many of you in the room honestly can honestly say that you understand that it's the real circumstances of your vocation? Now, move you to the secondary vocation, which is what? Your work. So what I'm trying to get teachers to understand is that the teaching profession, the teaching vocation, is how God is trying to make you holy in the midst of that. Now, I don't know if that's transformative for some of us, but it's a big step when you make it. When I suddenly realised that my marriage is God's trying to do something in that. So if you're involved in education, He's trying to do something to you through that, and you're meant to become a saint. Before Vatican II, we all thought it was kind of like a frequent flyer loyalty program. You had to be Monsignor or above to become a saint. Beautiful promulgation in the Second Vatican Council, of course, the universal call to holiness, where it just said all the baptized faithful are called to what? Sanctity of life. All of us. Do you honestly know that the vocation you're in, the teaching work, the marriage work, whatever you're in, is your invitation to become a saint? Oh, and what is a saint? First, I just think a saint is somebody who fell in love. If you look at saints, they just went, I want that. They encountered God and they just went, that's what I want. And eventually everything else slowly falls away. I call it my Harley moment. I grew up poor. I grew up with enormous financial stress. I was in a Salvation Army refuge by the age of 15. So I worked, built businesses, did very well, bought a beautiful home, and on one day I went and bought a brand new Harley Davidson for the kids. And I remember sitting on the Harley Davidson one day looking out my garage, and I had what I call the Harley moment, which was this. I just went, and now what? That I suddenly realised at the point of my life, nothing was actually going to do it. No more businesses, no more speaking engagements, no more nothing. And I just went, well, what do I want? And I can say with all my failings, I want to be with Him. Secondly, to become a saint means what? To become who you really are. I pitch that most of us have been hurt in life. We all carry many wounds, from bullying to rejection to trauma. We all construct ways of dealing with human pain. Often what happens with the saints is that this stuff begins to be healed and fall away, and they become truly authentic. They become the absolute person God made them to be. So here's the question for you. Approximately how much more of your life would you like to spend not being who you really are? So for those of you still sitting there going, this is nice, but it's abstract, He doesn't mean you. This is a little favour. I want to introduce you to a friend of mine. This is Barney. Some of you may recognise the face. Who can say they recognise who that is? Anybody yet? Okay, we've got a couple in the room. All right, this is Barney. Barney was born in Detroit in 1870. He was one of 11 children. Grew up incredibly poor, left home at the age of 11, became an itinerant labourer, ditch digging, worked as a tram conductor and a prison guard. He was out one night. He led a very dissolute life. He was always partying and drinking and carrying on. And one night he saw a sailor stab a young woman in front of him. This sailor just stabbed this girl. He was deeply traumatised, and he was like, he had a big sort of check on his life, and he had a bit of a religious conversion, went to the seminary, was accepted into the seminary in Detroit. He spent 6 years trying to get through seminary, but he couldn't get through the Greek, the Latin, and the German texts. So eventually they just kicked him out. They just said, you don't have a vocation, you can't do this. Went through a long period of depression. He was deeply disillusioned. He wandered, just working as a labourer and doing all these itinerant jobs until one day the Franciscans took pity on him. The Franciscans took him into their seminary. They spent 10 years nursing him through seminary, through the Latin, the Greek, and the German, and finally he got through. But he was so limited in his capacity that he was ordained as what's known as a simplex priest, which I didn't even know existed. A simplex priest usually can't hear homilies, can't hear confessions, and can't preach public homilies. It's basically the church's way of going, well, you have some kind of vocation, we just need you to keep you away from humans. So he gets through the vocation, and this is classic when you read this story. He's walking up the stairs of the chapter house, the Franciscan chapter house in Detroit, and they're literally making this up as they go. They're like, what are we going to do with this guy? Seriously. They walk through the front doors of the chapter house, and there's a little waiting room. And when he was ordained, he took the name Solanus, and they said, hey, look, Solanus, see this waiting room? What I want you to do is just sit in this waiting room. When the doorbell rings, just get up and answer the door and welcome the people. And if they're here for a treat, carry their bags to their room and go and get the important person they're here to see. And you get that Solanus, and he's like, yeah, doorbell rings, sit down, answer, carry the bags. He sits there for 4 hours, nothing happens. Doorbell rings, goes and answers the door, meets these people, welcomes them, has a chat to them. He's quite friendly, carries their bags, comes back, sits down, nothing happens. 3 hours, doorbell rings after 3 hours. Meets these people, welcomes them, carries their bags, comes back and sits down. Every time the doorbell rang, he answered the door for 22 years. But during that 22 years, something began to happen. He began to receive supernatural impartations of grace where he could do what? He could mysteriously understand the deepest prayer needs of complete strangers' hearts. He would sit in the room and he'd say, I'm really sorry, I don't mean to make you uncomfortable, but I have a deep sense that you need prayer for X. And he would name something happened 40 years before that no human being could have known, and people would weep, and supernatural healings began to happen. He had a specific grace with couples that couldn't conceive. 6 couples on record of being completely medically incapable of conception, prayed with by Solanus. Casey conceived children. He was allowed to preach public homilies on Wednesdays. Thousands of people began to come. And then he died. And then 30-odd years later, he was made blessed, Solanus Casey, and if you've been paying attention, about 6 months ago, he was recognised, not made, as some of you would understand that important difference, he was recognised as Saint Solanus Casey. What's the point? If God can make a saint out of a semi-literate, itinerant, ditch-digging, prison-guarding, tram-conducting Franciscan who could barely read, simply by getting him to open a door for 22 years, what's your excuse? You don't have one. He's trying to make me a saint through loving Karen and the children. He's trying to make me a saint through being a speaker. He's trying to make you a saint through wherever you're involved in education. And if that is not transformative, I'm either the worst speaker in the room or you're not breathing. How many of you in this room believe that student pastoral issues, self-harm, pornography addiction, internet addiction, self-hatred, eating disorders, family breakdown, how many of you believe that student pastoral issues over the next 10 years are going to become easier? Show of hands in 3, 2, 1. Okay, I failed maths at school, but I'm pretty sure the statistical outcome just then was 0. Final question. How many of you believe that pressures and interference from government, expectations from parents, and cultural expectations for schools to do more with less and get everyone into Harvard Business School and make everybody perfect, how many of you think cultural, political, social pressures are going to get less in the next 10 years? In 3, 2, 1. Okay. This is what we call the simple equation. increasing demands and complexity in an environment of finite time and resources. In the education space, you are facing increasing demands and complexity in an environment of finite human time and resources. Now, I failed maths, but join the dots. As that thing stretches and stretches, what happens is people break. The cynicism, the burnout, the exhaustion, the leaving of the profession. How many teachers are still passionate? They know why they're here. They know why this matters. And they can survive this simple equation. So you can see my Christology, right, as I'm pushing everybody back. If it was just a question of you being smarter and being more professional, see, in corporate stuff, we call that marginal gains. You can get a little bit better professionally, a bit more creative, a bit more organised. You can use a new planner. But what's coming down the line is way bigger than that. So we have to become saints. Because look at history, friends. Look at these limited, broken, small, incapacitated people that just did amazing culture-changing stuff. Do you think it was because they were just incredibly brilliant and smarter than you? They had different gifts and talents. But why not you? So friends, as it gets difficult, let me share with you a couple of beautiful quotes. This is a real favourite. It's in the time of greatest aridity and disenchantment that God's true lovers are born. If you find some of this work hard, you know why? Teresa of Avila said this: it is in times of greatest aridity, dryness, spiritual desolation, it's in times of greatest aridity and disenchantment that God's true lovers are born. So when it's difficult, when it's hard for you in the teaching space or the pastoral space, you either break or you become dependent. And I've pretty much broken once before, so I've learned to become dependent. So I'm going to offer you that. You can save yourself a heap of time. To become truly dependent. Anyone who is living has hope. It's better to be a live dog than a dead lion, which means you're still in the game. If you're breathing, it's not over. If you're breathing, God is not done writing your story, and He's not done with what He can accomplish through you. So have some hope. If He's called you into it, whose problem is it? It's His. Isn't that good news? Did you wake up this morning and did you go through your profession thinking, I've got to work harder, I've got to be smarter, I've got to be this? Grace builds on nature. He will cooperate. That's a beautiful line from Augustine again, if you haven't heard this. He who made you without your cooperation will not save you without your cooperation. Isn't that great? He who made you without your cooperation will not save you without your cooperation. The God that made you didn't ask for your permission, but He will ask for your permission to make you a saint. Isn't that amazing? The humility there. So friends, you're still in the game, you're still alive, let's cooperate. Moving on. Without using an electronic device. Without using an electronic device. Does anybody know which film won the 1965 Academy Award for Best Picture? Wasn't The Sound of Music. Wasn't To Serve With Love. One young teacher threw their hand up once and said, was it Rambo? I'm like, dear child, I could destroy you right now, but no, it's not Rambo. Based on the brilliant Broadway play written by the brilliant playwright Thomas Beckett, starring the brilliant British actor Sir Paul Schofield. Man for All Seasons. Man for All Seasons. This is Sir Paul Schofield, who died just a few years ago. If you're not familiar with the history, it's the story of St. Thomas More, of course, who would not give Henry VIII his divorce. It's a phenomenal film. Who has not seen the film, the baby Jesus is now crying. Okay? Do not go to your death without having seen this film. So if you're on your deathbed at some point, just go, quick, get me an iPad, I must. Okay, phenomenal film. Why am I showing it to you? Because at the start of the film, there's a beautiful moment where St. Thomas More is standing on the banks of the Thames with Richard Rich. Richard eventually betrays him. Who is Richard Rich? He is a teacher in the courts of Henry VIII. But being a teacher isn't enough for him. He wants to be in the power games of Henry VIII's court. He wants to be seen and noticed and promoted. So he's telling St. Thomas More all this stuff, and St. Thomas More turns to him and says, Rich, you're a teacher. Why not be a great one? And Richard Rich looks back at him and says, but who would know? See the trajectory of the heart? Validate me. Tell me my worth is in what I can do, my status, my profession, my power. And St. Thomas More stops and beautifully says, who would know? He says, Rich, your students, your parents, your friends, God, Not a bad audience, that, Rich. Not a bad audience. So one of the things I'm trying to do with educators is say to you, if you never did anything else, would this be enough? Years ago when I was on the student circuit, a principal in Sydney came to me and she said, Jonathan, our girls come to school in midsummer with jumpers. I grew up with 4 brothers and I just went. She said, they're cutting themselves. And they're wearing jumpers in 40 degrees to hide it. Every kid? No, but enough. If you were a teacher or in pastoral work of some form and you were able to reach one, would that be enough for you? Would that be enough? So if you're going to be a teacher, as Thomas More said, be a great one. If you're going to do this anyway, friends, be a great one. With respect, I encountered so many teachers that would sit in the back of the room full of cynicism and and I'm going, why would you bother? Why bother? Why become so bored and angry and unhappy? That can't be God's will. So if you're going to do this, friends, whatever space you're engaging with other humans, why not be the best one you can? When I work on keynotes and stuff overseas, I'm like, maybe I used to kind of think I better do a really good job so I impress everybody and everyone tells me I'm clever. And that just made me so anxious that I could barely stand up. So it took me 10 years, I'm a very slow learner, to finally go, why not bless people and give heaps of glory to God and preach a crucified Christ and make it His problem? So if you're going to do it, friends, don't be mediocre. Oh yeah, ask yourself this. If He called you into teaching, education, ministry, priesthood, do you think He was like, let's call them into this vocation so they can be really average? Let's call them into the priesthood, or let's call them into teaching so they can be really unhappy. And the Trinity's like, yeah, let's do that. No. What do you think the will of the heart of God is for you? Who in this room has had children? Okay. Think of your own children. Did you look at your kids and go, you saw a talent they had, a gift? Did you ever say to them, you're terrible at that. I hope you end up really useless at it? As a parent, you were like, yes, go, more, do, yes. What do you think God's there doing? God's there in the Trinity going, look at him teach, look at him teach, look at him bless that student, look at him reach out to that guy. If you're going to do it anyway, friends, be a great one. I want to give you a scriptural basis for this. Teaching is extraordinary moral depth and is one of the human person's most excellent creative activities. For the teacher does not write on inanimate material, but on the very spirit of human beings. So that's not a scriptural, that's from the Catholic school document. Ephesians 3, it was He who gave some to be pastors, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, and some to be teachers. So we have a very clear scriptural understanding that God specifically called people into the vocation, whether it's as a bishop or a priest or a teacher or a layperson. If you're in teaching, do this really simply. It can't be accidental. It can't be. But would that change things for you if you really understood that one principle? It would have to mean He really loved you, right? It would have to mean that He actually really cared about you, that He wanted to position you in the place where you could be the best possible blessing to others. So what I'm trying to do with teachers is just close this gap. Close the gap between where you are now and the teacher that He's calling you to be. And I have to let Him close the gap between the husband I am now and the husband He wants me to be. So this is Aristotle's sort of eudaimonia principle, like becoming the fullness of who you are, closing this gap. Let's close this gap. So, question. How many people, well, here's the scriptural basis, sorry, on the next slide. It's Ephesians 4, sorry. Look at that. I didn't write the Bible, but look at that. It's either true or it isn't. So if you are involved in some kind of pastoral education or teaching, it's either random chance or it's on purpose. Then you can relax. If He's called you into it, He's got to carry you. So back to this one just quickly. With a show of hands, who can honestly say that they know the Latin etymological root of the word vocation? Who can honestly say that they know the Latin etymological root of the word vocation? Who's paying attention? Okay, good, thank you. Look around the room. Now, Here's where I get to do my favourite quote. I invented this. It's mine. You hear it any other conference, someone stole it from me. The Catholic Church has the greatest product in the world with the worst marketing department. All right? Why? Because every one of you in this room has a vocation. But with respect, in your journey as Christians, no one has ever communicated to you what that means. So, of course, vocation comes from the Latin vocare, which roughly translated in different ways, to call out, to draw forth, to bring forth or to call out. So the understanding of vocation in the Christian sense is that Almighty God has called out of you something and called you into something. That's different to a job, right? A job is replaceable. A job is not intrinsically linked to your identity. My first job for 3 weeks was at McDonald's. But I don't walk around at 44.2 with the identity of a McDonald's worker. Vocation is called out, called forth. So first thing is to understand you have a vocation, and secondly to see what God's going to do with that. Here's some beautiful quotes from John Baptiste de La Salle that people tend to really like. If you want to write them or photograph them. De La Salle used to teach this to his teachers. He would get his teachers around and he would teach them these things. God has given you so many graces. Look at that last word. What does it mean? If anybody in this room is funny, some of you in this room are deeply compassionate. Some of you in this room have great gifts of empathy. Some of you in this room are very good listeners. Some of you in this room know exactly how to challenge a student at the right time. Do you think that's an accident? Grace builds on nature. He has given you graces. You thought they might have been characterological, and they are, but they're graces to discharge the task. God has chosen you to do His work. I love saying this to people. Here it is. What if it's true? What if that's true? Jonathan, I want you to speak. And I want you to speak everywhere until I tell you to stop, and I'm fine either way. But it changes my perspective when I go, this isn't me doing this or asking for this work. I've been invited to do it by Him, and He's got to carry me, and it's a different perspective. God has chosen you to make Him known to others. I love this. I was speaking in New Mexico, and I said to these teachers, I said, look, God is omnipotent. If you're a teacher, who does classroom teaching in the room? All right, we've got a few. All right, if you're teaching, or if you're doing pastoral work or marriage education, if the Supreme Trinity can appear in physical form in your classroom. So you can be there on a Monday, and then bang, the Divine Trinity appears right there. First thing happens is your students are like, wow, it's true. But I like saying to audiences, but if God doesn't appear in physical form, how will young people or young married couples encounter Him? If not through your vocation. So you understand that? That people are actually encountering God through your vocation. Look at that line. He's chosen you to make Him known to others. We are called like the apostles to make God known to others. This is a favourite. Young people need good teachers like visible angels. How many kids are exposed to so much darkness? What if they came to a place where they saw visible angels? And I know you don't wake up on a Monday morning, stand back, give me my wings. But to be a visible angel for young people. Okay. And the last one, you can photograph that. I'll just show you a little favourite here. This is from Paul VI, who just simply said that modern man listens more willingly to witnesses than to teachers. And if he does listen to teachers, it's because they are witnesses. It's a Jedi kind of thing, that. It's deep, isn't it? So whether you do a marriage prep or sexuality formation or classroom teaching or pastoral work or preaching, there's a big difference between here's what I want you to understand about God as opposed to I have experienced Him. Remember St. Paul? I know Him on whom I have believed. It's a big difference, isn't it? So friends, we've seen these. He's called you to your ministry and He entrusts to you the care of the young. So let's move from vocation to this beautiful concept of mission, missio Dei. So what the church would have you understand is that your vocation moves you to mission. One beautiful way to understand this is that at the Annunciation, Mary doesn't experience the Annunciation and pop it on Instagram, right? Mary's not like hashtag, incarnate word inbound, right? What's the first thing Mary does is she goes out. She doesn't stay where she is. Vocation moves us to mission. Missio Dei, of course, translates as the sending of God. The sending of God. It's a beautiful sort of lyrical tone to it. If you are called, you are sent. If you are called, you are sent into that mission. There's a beautiful line in Pope Paul VI's encyclical, which you have on your bedside, and I know you read each evening, Evangelii Nunciandi, where he just says this line. I hope you've heard this before. The Catholic Church does not have a mission. We all go, sure it does. We have mission statements. He said, the Catholic Church does not have a mission. I always love this. He said this. Next sentence. She is a mission. So what happens often with teachers is they go, well, there's the church, and then we got in the education game. It's like the parallel enterprise, the satellite business of the Catholic Church. No, it's the one mission. If you're doing pastoral work, marriage work, school teaching, we all have the same mission, to bring Christ to birth in the hearts of people so they can enter a relationship with him. And you go, but I'm doing marriage prep. So you're just going to teach them to love. Maybe you don't necessarily preach Christ, but you teach them to love. So friends, our vocation leads us to mission, and the biblical basis, of course, is you look at Abraham, you look at Moses, you look at Jesus. There's this hermeneutic of calling, right? Once you get called, it's not like God goes, Abraham, I'll make you the father of many nations. Stay right there. Abraham, I'll make you the father of many nations. Go. Moses, I'm going to call you into the desert. I want you to sit there and look after sheep till you die. Moses, I called you out of Egypt, and now I'm going to send you back. Moses is like, really? Jesus is, we have the baptism in the Jordan, and then he's driven out into the desert. There's the calling and the sending. So friends, if you are called, you are sent. Here's your question. What's your mission field? What is your mission field right now? My mission field is this, and to love Karen and my children. I don't have 3, I have probably 2. Where has he placed you right now? How is he asking you to participate in this great mission? This life is very short. And finally, of course, awareness of mission leads, I think true awareness of this mission should lead you to dependence. If it doesn't, you're in big trouble. And it's just a matter of time. So the beautiful example I give is this one here, of Oscar Romero. Who's seen the film of his life? You've seen Oscar, the film of it? Sorry. Got to see the film about Oscar Romero's life. So if you're not familiar, of course, El Salvador, he was made a martyr. He was murdered in the sacristy. If you see the film and you understand his life, he did not want to be a bishop. He was a very timid dude, and he just wanted to be a priest and just keep quiet, and the stuff was happening. He was made a bishop, an archbishop, and he was struggling with it. And there's a profound moment in the film where 6 Jesuits have been ambushed and slaughtered. They found them at a crossroads, and these government militia just AK-47s killed 6 Jesuits. And there's a moment in the film where Oscar Romero feels all this pressure coming from the government, and he doesn't want to fight. He just doesn't. And he goes out on his own to these crossroads, and it's deeply moving. And he stands there, and the blood of these Jesuits is still there. It's like a week later, and you can see the blood stains. And the wind's blowing, and he's on his own. And there's this moment of dialogue where 3 lines of dialogue are spoken. He speaks, then God literally speaks through him. He announces, he speaks out what God's saying inside him, and then he speaks again. And these 3 words are this. He just goes, I cannot. And then he whispers, you must. And then he just says, I'm yours. That just broke me every time I saw it. I was just like, I get that. We're not up to the mission, friends. It's beyond us and it's too big, but I know who is up to it. And if you will consider this path of dependence, it's a very beautiful thing. And can I please make this concrete for you, not abstract? I'm not saying just have a nice thought about this. I'm going, as you go into your marriage from here, or your next marriage prep thing that you do, or your next classroom, or your next staff meeting, or your next bishop's meeting, or priestly meeting, it's like, help me. Help me to be who you need me to be now. When I get home this afternoon, Karen's not very well, I've got young kids, and it's like, Lord, I swear, I tell you the truth, I've been saying to people for a decade, you know where I've learned about sanctity? Kitchen sink. A number of times I've just done dishes when I'm tired, or mopped the floor, or read an extra story. And I'm like, Lord, help me to be a saint here, now, in this reality. And friends, I hope I'm getting through that. Whatever you're called to right now, that's what he's trying to do. So this, of course, leads to sanctification. It leads to him shaping you. I often think in terms of vocation that it's important to help people think about being useful. Our culture celebrates attainment and pleasure, but a great way to help young people think about this stuff is, how can I be useful in this life? How can I be useful? So this work here, which is no better or worse than yours, I'm trying to be useful. Some people find me very useful, some less so, but I'm trying to be useful so that when I die, I tried as much as I could to be useful. I had a few thoughts about the key elements of what we're looking for in Catholic education, which are part of a bigger... But I want to finish with a couple of things. If you are taking notes around the education space, the longest seminar that I would give is we're looking for 3 key elements in Catholic education. They're just worth having down to think about. Number 1 is all about the Christocentricity of it. But our job isn't to be a version of secular education with some niceness on the periphery. Catholic schools are established to present the person of Jesus Christ and create a reality in which young people can enter into a lifelong relationship with him. So if Catholic schools are not deeply Christocentric, we have an enormous problem. And I think that's really where our problem lies. If you have 50 staff and 20 staff are deeply Christocentric and 30 aren't, I'm not saying they're bad people, I'm just saying you get one kind of school. If you have a school where 40 staff are deeply Christocentric, you get a different kind of school. So really, the first thing we're looking for is Christocentricity. So at the moment I'm studying again Catechesi Tradendae, and Pope St. John Paul II talks about the centrality of Christ in catechesis, in any teaching. So that's the first thing. The second key point, along with Christocentricity, is just the value of the human person. So that to be a Catholic educator, whether it's in, look, even in your marriage, right? Because I know we've got a mix here today. You don't view the people you're forming in marriage as carbon-based bipods existing by chance in an uncaring universe. You see them as individual human persons made in the image of Almighty God who have a trajectory in life, an eternal destiny. So a Catholic school must have a deep Christological sense of the person. Why shouldn't you look at pornography? I mean, most people are, because it doesn't tell the truth. I mean, John Paul II used to say the problem with pornography is not that it shows too much, but rather that it shows too little. So Christocentricity and the human person. And the last thing is just this concept of integral formation, which is everything we do in a Catholic educational context is caught up. So sport, music, drama, literature, all of this stuff is caught up in a Christian view of the person. Christianity became the state religion of the Roman Empire in 313 when, at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, in 476, Rome was finally sacked, and basically Christianity almost disappeared. If you think of a candle flickering, it was a really close-run thing, and then we get Benedict of Nursia in the 6th century building the first monasteries. What's my point? In the 6th century, and again in the 10th and 11th centuries, there were these tiny little communities like Lindisfarne and Iona off the coast of Scotland, where 30 to 40 men and women rebuilt these tiny little Christian communities. And from these communities, honestly, Europe itself was re-evangelized. I named my son Aidan after St. Aidan, who's called the Little Fire, who at 22 walked barefoot back into Europe and faced Pictish tribes on his own preaching a crucified Christ. What's my point? These communities, I think this is what he's asking us to do. Pope Benedict made the point that our church may become smaller for a while. But what we need are little communities of men and women. If 30 or 40 people can do this, so can we. We must become saints and build these little communities of faith. This is what's happening here. Be courageous, be hopeful, because he's not done with us. He's still writing the story.